Greetings, badass entrepreneurs. Coach Dan Gordon here with a very special episode of For Badass Entrepreneurs Only. Today, the tables get turned and I get interviewed by Tal Zielinski, Braving Business. I know you're going to love it. Check it out.
Well, hello there.
Good afternoon, Mr. Benoit. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm good. How are you, man?
I'm well. I had a nice, relaxing weekend. The weather was great, and St. Patrick's Day, so that's always fun.
It is.
I wore green. I drank beer. Well, what could possibly be wrong with that?
I call that Tuesday. Let's see. So of course, St. Patty's Day. I'm a little bit late. I'm making my world famous corned beef tomorrow, to be honest. Just because my family will be here. And then, but I was at the Inspired Home Show at McCormick Place in Chicago. You ever been to like a massive trade show?
I have. I can't say that I love those. The boat shows are fun. How about you, Dan? Have you been to some? I'm sure you have, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, so lots of boat shows, lots of car shows. Yeah, definitely. That was a big part of my youth.
Yeah. Some of these booths are literally like they constructed a home. Like they make the massive structures inside of McCormick Place, which, they have like over 3 million square feet under roof. So it's a massive building, but still to like walk through these displays, it's just kind of mind boggling. It's really cool. So just thought, it was fun. I did a lot of walking. I was destroyed because I'm fat and and that's just fact. And I haven't walked that much in a long time. So I got all my steps in. It was a lot of fun, but
good man.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Well, PJ, and now that you got those steps in, maybe you have the energy to introduce our guest.
I do. Don't I sound juiced? I'm ready.
You do.
I'm ready. I'm ready for Dan because I hope everyone's ready for Dan because we have the incomparable Dan Gordon on today. Dan, for over 2 decades, Coach Dan Gordon, that's his actual legal name. Coach Dan Gordon has been helping bold entrepreneurs step into unlimited success in workshops, through coaching, and in large venue speaking. How he got there, though, is a classic tale of braving life and braving business. Ironically, that's the name of this podcast.
How about that?
I know, isn't that nuts? You see, way back when in 2015, Dan made the mistake that destroyed his marketing company. In July of that year, he found himself face down on the floor of a Washington, D.C. hotel room, suffering from what he described in interviews as an emotional breakdown. A couple of weeks prior, his marketing company had collapsed, and he says that he truly felt that it was at the end of everything for him, but to his surprise, and I quote, he found that strangely enough, instead of it being the end, it turned out to be the beginning. Standing at the crossroads of life, Coach Dan chose a bold new direction. We'll hear all about that new direction and what led him to be on today's episode. Nowadays, Coach Dan works with individuals and companies that are seeking to break through barriers, helping them, in his words, to unlock the badass version of themselves with workshops such as No Douchebag Selling, which I absolutely love, which by the name alone, I just want to dig into, as well as The Container, which is all about igniting one's inner fire. Coach Dan has said some things in interviews that we are looking forward to getting into, including, and I quote, success and failure are not two opposite sides of the same coin. They are rather the same side of the same coin. Intriguing. Coach Dan, thank you for joining us today on the Business Podcast.
That is the best introduction. And not just because it was about me, but I sincerely appreciate the things that you brought up, because I mean, these are core to what I'm about and what I believe is important to bring to the world.
That's fantastic. Well done, PJ. By the way, this is a joint episode. We're very proud of that. I think it's our first. I don't think we've done one of these before.
It most certainly is.
This episode will also run on Dan's very successful podcast called For Badass Entrepreneurs Only. So you could, if you're listening on Braving Business, that's great. If you're listening on Dan's podcast, that's great. Just listen or watch. That's fabulous. Dan, it's great to have you here. I'd like you to take us back to July 2015. You're in that hotel room, face down, as you described it. your marketing company had just collapsed and it was due to a mistake that you made. I've been there,
Yes.
so I can relate. Take us back to that moment. What can you tell? What led to that moment, and what realization came out of that moment for you?
So, I've told this story a lot, but the thing that I don't talk about often is that the biggest choice in the moment was how I was going to define what was happening, right? And either I was going to define it as circumstances created this situation, or I created the situation. And look, I've studied successful people all of my professional career. And one of the things that is indicative of all successful people is they take full responsibility for everything that happens to them. Now, that's really easy to say when everything's going great. But when you're in that moment of pain and anguish, you really want to blame someone else, right? So I had hired a guy inadvertently who turned out to be a pathological liar, right? And he made a lot of promises about a lot of things that he couldn't do. And when it became clear that he couldn't do them, we had to refund all the money, and all of our clients dropped us, and it just became a catastrophic domino effect. And so even in that pain and anguish, I knew that I had created this for a purpose. Like there was a greater purpose for having destroyed my own marketing company, right? Taking full responsibility. And the real reason is I hate marketing. I'm just really good at it, right? But it was never my heart's desire. It was never supposed to be a career. I just got my ego mind involved in it, and I couldn't extricate myself from it. And so beneath a level of my awareness, I think I hired this guy as a way out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the guy that you hired, the pathological liar, he was your way out.
Yes, exactly.
So a different way out, though. Sounds like it.
Well, that worked, didn't it?
Well, I wish
not quite how you intended it to.
But
Yeah.
No. I mean, I would like the 100K back, but things ended up the way that they ended up. And a nice little postscript to that story is 8 months later, I walked out on stage in Dallas, Texas, being paid $10,000 for my very first speaking gig. Right, so that journey from the floor to the stage was all about transformation, and that's the work that I do. It's the work that I love.
Journey from the floor to the stage. That's really good. So talk to us about that, right? Those first tentative moments where you're starting to do you're holding that new little baby in your hands.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to take a step back into the arena after failure? And what demons or fears were you battling with? And what story did you tell yourself so that fear wouldn't stop you?
Okay. Wow. Great question. So much to unpack. Let's start with the story.
Okay.
Right? So stories are things that we tell ourselves, right, to keep us safe. A story like, I'm not ready yet, right? I hear that a lot. Someone says, well, I'm not ready yet. Well, it's a lie, right? It is a story that is designed to protect the ego self from doing something that could be catastrophic. Right. So if I say I'm not ready, then I have a really good excuse for not taking action and doing something that feels dangerous. So all of these stories came up. Like one story was, who's going to hire a business coach who just failed at business? And that's a really compelling story, right? That's a story that anybody would agree with. However, I had to identify that it was a story. And it was a really easy story to keep me safe from taking another risk that could end up with me in the same place, right? So I really had to acknowledge that the reasons I was coming up with why this wouldn't work were just things I was putting in place because I didn't want to recreate the pain I was feeling.
So if I'm hearing you right, I think what I'm hearing is that the biggest fear was failing again. And that I think is a very common fear for entrepreneurs that experience failure, which is generally speaking, all of us.
Yeah.
So that fear of getting back in the arena is in and of itself nearly paralyzing, and overcoming that takes a tremendous amount of gumption and something else. Moxie, I'm not sure. What we found on the podcast is that there is a unique ability among people that are successful to get up from the floor, from that face down position you're in that hotel room. And despite the odds being great of failure and the potential ramifications of that, they step back into the arena. So you did that too. I love PJ's question. You know, I mean, we heard about your fears. What did you do to overcome those fears? What was it that what steps did you take to allow you to get past those demons and those fears?
Okay. The first thing, and if you who are listening are going through this, or you will go through it, because if you're playing life right, you can't trust yourself, right? You can't trust your own thinking. So I essentially wiped the whiteboard of my life clean, right? Anything that I believed, I stopped believing, right? I just didn't judge or evaluate who I was or what I was doing. I simply moved in the direction, right? So I started telling people that I'm a business coach, and all of the stories and all of the reasoning that said I wasn't or I couldn't do it, I just had to excuse out of my mind. I just had to keep moving in the direction, even though I didn't know if the direction was going to head anywhere. Right? So I was telling people what I was doing, and surprisingly enough, the majority of people in my life were like, well, thank God, this is what you should be doing. Like, moron, this stupid marketing thing, that was never you. And so I started looking for clues that told me I was headed in the right direction, right? So I didn't trust myself. I trusted the empirical evidence around me. And the people who I trusted knew that I was going in the right direction. And then all of the conversations that I was having, I just let unfold for me to discover if I was a fraud or if I really knew what I was talking about. So I started giving people advice as a coach, unsure if the advice was correct, but it turns out that most of the time it was. And so that started building my confidence. And so if I can say anything around how to do this, how to truly transform, you have to move forward with complete uncertainty, not trust your own feelings, because your feelings are going to mislead you, but to trust the empirical evidence of what is happening in that moment and build on that.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
And,
go ahead, please.
Well, and that's what I do with all of my clients. I mean, you know, we always end up in a space where they're like, I don't know. I mean, this sounds like a bad idea. I'm like, okay, great. Now the work begins.
Makes a lot of sense. So we're talking about like authenticity, right? Yeah. And authenticity in sales.
I know, right?
Right. It doesn't sound like that really goes very well.
Yeah.
But I love that, right? Because, you know, I've been in sales my entire career. Tal's been in sales. Everyone's in sales. Of
course.
If you're an entrepreneur, you're in sales.
Yes. I mean, but really, even if you think about it organizationally, every person who answers that phone, who answers that email is in sales because they're the face of the company. So everyone's in sales, and authenticity, of course, in my particular industry, which is transportation, really goes a long way, because we're all about relationships and building partnerships. And that's, you have to be authentic in order to do that. Yeah. So your authenticity in that and in relationships is like a cornerstone of your philosophy. How did you get to that? Like, I love the fact that, first of all, I love the fact that you're saying, you know, move forward, even though you're not completely confident of the road ahead, right? You got to plod forward.
Yeah.
But how did you get to authenticity being such a cornerstone? What drew you to that?
Well, it was being inauthentic that drove me to that floor in snot and tears, right? Like, I was being inauthentic with what I'm about in the world. And I'm about transformation and consciousness, bringing people to a greater awareness of themselves so they can experience their greatest self, right? So I knew I wasn't doing that. So I decided that I had to be fully authentic and honest with people. and regardless of whether or not that turned into income. And so, look, I didn't like selling. People say, "Oh, you're so lucky, coach. You're a natural born salesperson." I'm not. I'm not. I used to hyperventilate before and after sales meetings, sometimes during sales meetings, right? I'd have to excuse myself to the bathroom to go hyperventilate for a little while. So this doesn't come to me naturally. But what I realized, I was putting so much pressure on myself. Like that was the fear and torment. And that I had to be something other than who I am in a sales meeting in order to close a deal. So when I just started to do things that are very counterintuitive, people would say, "Gee, I'm not sure if this is right for me." And I was like, "Yeah, I can understand that. It might not be." So, I mean, can we have a conversation, see if it is? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. And what I started doing is championing their points of view, their side of the story. And it wasn't giving up on them. It became a deep understanding of them. And so what I did is I invested myself in being more interested in my prospect than I am in closing my prospect, learning about them, understanding them, and getting a clear picture of what their drivers are.
So if one of my objectives on this podcast, one of the reasons I started this podcast is I also experienced significant setback fairly late in my career after many, many years of success. And at first I felt a lot of shame about that. And then once that subsided, I felt an urge to evangelize a different way to look at failure.
Yeah.
And a different way to look at risk. And it sounds like you're sort of taking the same approach. And I'm wondering, is that what you mean by success and failure are the same side of the same coin?
Yeah, it really is, in that when you pursue something and you have an outcome that you're pleased with, it feels great. And when you pursue something and have an outcome that you're not pleased with, you get a great learning experience. Either way, it's a great experience. Now, it feels different, and this is where I got to push back on Obi-Wan Kenobi. You cannot trust your feelings because your feelings do misguide you, right? If you go see a horror film, you're afraid of getting attacked, but you're in no greater danger than you were before the horror film, right? So your feelings misguide you. And so what you want to look at instead is how you move forward. And that was key, getting off that floor and what I'm doing now. And I continue to have setbacks because I continue to move forward very quickly.
Dive into that for me. What do you
Yeah.
mean? What do you mean? Look at how you move forward. What does that mean? Because moving forward is an action. Looking.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Can you give me get a little bit skinnier on that for me, please?
Yeah. Are you doing more new things? That's what moving forward is. So, for instance, I have really upped my game in my coaching recently, and I was pretty bold before, but I'm being even more bold with my clients. I'm bringing more truth. And these are the type of clients that I have. They aren't toe in the water people. Like, they are all in. And hey, guess what? I went too far. Right? I went too far with one client. I was too relentless. I didn't back down, and it was too much for her. Right? So I had to clean it up. But the thing is the aggregate is that I am challenging myself to be more bold and to figure out how to do that. And when I do that, I'm going to make mistakes. And so that's the new thing that I'm doing. Launching No Douchebag Selling. There's a lot of mistakes there, but that's bold. It's new. I don't know everything about it.
Yeah. So, first of all, no douchebag selling. I absolutely love, because as soon as I hear douchebag selling, I immediately have a picture in my mind of what that looks like.
Yes.
But how did you come up with that? Like, what did you do to develop this concept? And like, why do you think it resonates so strongly, even though it's named beautifully? Why do you think it's done so well? Getting adopted by people?
So
Start by telling us what it is. What is No Douchebag Selling?
So this is by the way, the actual program hasn't launched yet, and very close to it, but it is selling authentically, right? It is developing genuine conversations with people. It is the antithesis of the Sandler method of features and benefits and pain points and the open and the close and it's all bullshit, right? I hate that because the level of inauthenticity and the grind that you put your prospect through in that it's awful, right? And so this direction is all about deepening those relationships. And look, the way that I came up with this was through failure, right? It was going to be called the Authentic Selling Program. And can you think of a more boring title than that, right? Right? You would never remember that. And so I'm moving forward on this. I'm designing everything around the Authentic Selling Program, and got 3/4 of the way through. I started working with another coach because I believe in coaching. I get coached. I have a very expensive coach. And he took a look at this and he said, well, what the hell is this? This is terrible. He said, this is the worst title. And I said, yeah, but it's authentically. And he said, let's talk about what this is. And so we went back and forth. I said, look, this is just about not selling like a douchebag. And he says, perfect. That's it. And I'm like, oh, I get it, right? So, this was born out of failure. And this was, if I had launched it in that way, it would have failed. Then I would have had to recreate it, right? And so that's why I coach. That's why I love coaches, is they really help you avoid some pretty big mistakes.
What's interesting about what you just said that I think is very, very relevant to a lot of people's businesses, and it's worth pausing on for a second. You didn't change the program. You had an idea for a program, and you're confident, and I actually concur, that if you had gone with the original name that you'd given it, it would have failed. And ultimately, the new name you picked is so compelling, it's hard to not be interested in understanding, well, what is that? What advice would you give people about daring more when it comes to branding? You're a marketing guy. At least you've spent a lot of your career there. I know you're a reluctant marketer, but share your thoughts on being more daring when it comes to your brand.
Okay. The most important thing in this point in history in marketing is being interesting, not being good, not just being effective, but being interesting. You have to be interesting first and good second. Like authentic selling is good. It's a much better method than anything else that's out there, but it's not interesting. And because of the rise of social media and now AI, everybody is looking for the jingly keys. When you're taking a picture of a baby and you jingle keys to get the baby to look at, like, that's what our world is now. And you can't complain about it. You can't fight it. You have to adopt it. What is the interesting part of my product or service that would make people look at it and go, wow, I want to know some more about that. I want to lean in and understand that better. And it's not just your product, it's you, because you are your brand. Like when I would go networking and people would say, what do you do for a living? I wouldn't say a business coach. I say, I'm a professional troublemaker. And why? Because it's interesting. It opens up a conversation. So start with that and test market it with people that just put it out there. When I started saying no douchebag selling, everybody loves that. Everybody loves that.
Except maybe the manufacturers of douching products. That's their problem.
Yeah, Massengill might not like this whole podcast.
I'm going to run it by them.
Maybe they should sponsor. Oh, never mind. Let's keep going.
Good. Side note, it'll be interesting to tell our significant others, hey, we're sponsored by Massengill. That would be kind of fun. So we're talking about douchebaggery, which I love, because Lord knows I've lived it. So when you're talking about facing competitive pressures and industry evolutions, which as we know, are par for the course for entrepreneurship. Can you discuss a time? Well, actually, let's focus on that. Really, you know, what about facing competitive pressures, and what about like the couching the douchebaggery part of it with everything that we experience in entrepreneurship? Like how do you navigate that?
So let me add one more thing, Dan, that I want you to chime in on, because I think it's such a great question. Given the fact that the marketplace is so competitive, and there are douchebags out there that you're competing with, and I'm speaking to our audience, they're doing well, and you're like, fuck, that guy's a dick and he's doing well. And that makes it appear that being a douchebag is the path forward. I've not cussed this much in 50 episodes, by the way. So I apologize to everyone that was taken aback by that.
I'm actually titillated. I love it. Go on.
Are you? Okay. So in the face of competitive pressure, sometimes succumbing to douchebaggery seems like the right course. Why isn't it?
Okay. I'm going to equate this to dating, right? Because when I was dating, there was a time where I was showed up really full of myself. And you know what? It worked. I got girls being overly confident. But the quality of people that I was dating was not the quality of people that I wanted in my life. And not ironically, when I lost my marketing company and I lost my ego just disappeared, it's when I met the love of my life, Rosalind. And, amazingly, not much of a catch, like when you're on the floor, but there was something about.
I'm sure you're speaking about yourself when you say not much of a catch.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, me. No, Rosalind's
Just
amazing.
making
No,
sure that if Rosalind is listening,
yes,
really.
She understands what you're speaking of there.
A guy who just lost his business is not that much of a catch, but the quality of who I showed up as in authenticity. And so let's talk about that in terms of business. Yeah, you can do well being a jerk and selling crap if you have that ability to be that charismatic, but it's not much of a life. And it doesn't have longevity to it. You can look at that person and go, wow, he's hitting it. But I've never seen that have a tremendous amount of longevity. You don't get the clients that make you feel good. And overall, you still got to look at yourself in the mirror. And if you can do that, if you can navigate that, have crappy clients, look at yourself in the mirror and not care that you're hurting people or that you're not really bringing value, well, go be an awful person, but don't call yourself an entrepreneur. Just be a con artist. If you really want to create something in the world, and every entrepreneur I have ever talked to, when I get down to the point of why they're really in business, the answer is always because I want to help people. And that is from, coaches to dentists to CPAs. Everybody always gets to, I want to help people. And if you want to help people, being a douchebag is not the way to do it.
Unless you're Massengill.
In the pejorative term.
Yes, of course. Of course. So you have listed that you have studied some very influential people. Dr. King, Richard Branson, awesome guy. Elon Musk, controversial guy, who has informed your coaching. Speaking of douchebaggery, what common traits do you feel these leaders have that other entrepreneurs should emulate?
They stand in the fire of other people's disapproval. And it is one of the hardest things that as human beings, we have to do as entrepreneurs, because we are designed by God, the universe, happenstance, whatever you want to call it. We are designed in our ego structure to be drawn towards rapport And if you think about it, when we were cave dwellers, we had to be in rapport with other cave dwellers to survive. Our survival depended on being in community. We had to hunt together. We had to gather together. We had to defend ourselves. We could not live alone. If you were excommunicated from the group, you would die. And so flash forward a couple million years, we still have that same operating system that we're operating under. This sense of, if I hurt someone's feelings, if I push people away, this awful thing is going to happen. And so in order to truly be a leader, and as an entrepreneur, you have to have leadership qualities. By definition, all of these leaders were willing to have people not like them while they were pursuing leadership to get to a point where they were revered as icons and luminaries. But it is hard. It is really hard at that moment when you have people really disappointed with you, putting pressure on you to be different, to stand in the foundation of your beliefs. And the truth is, sometimes you're going to be wrong. Sometimes they will be right. And you will have to pivot. But you cannot become who you're truly meant to be as an entrepreneur, making sure everybody likes you.
It's interesting. I concur in part. I don't really have much difficulty with the Richard Branson inspiration to your coaching, and I do get what you're saying about being willing to stand there and take the heat. I think that's an excellent point, and particularly if you're on a larger playing field, running a bigger company, you're going to face a lot of heat, and it's going to come from investors, and it's going to come from the marketplace, and it's going to come from potentially regulators, and being able to hold firm to core principles, I think is really important. But Elon Musk, I'm really struggling with. I mean, there's no question the man's brilliant or has done brilliant things. But he's also exhibiting a lot of traits that I would call, he's absolutely falling in the category of douchebaggery, right? Example recently.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys heard it. It was in the news. Don Lemon was going to do a show on X. His first interview was with Elon Musk. Elon did not like the interview and he fired him. Not in my opinion, anything that merits emulation. And I've said when I speak to particularly younger entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, I often actually call out the Elon Musks of the world, not in the negative sense, just to say, look, they are not who you're trying to be, because they represent, the smallest of the smallest subgroup of entrepreneurs. You are far more likely to achieve what you are set out to achieve in the world.
Yeah.
Not by thinking small, but by thinking proportionally. And Elon Musk has accomplished big things. It's hard to argue that he's representing the best of. And how do you, is he still someone that you consider an inspiration, even now?
I wouldn't call him an inspiration. I think he's a sociopath. I don't think he truly understands when he's doing things that are hurtful. I don't think it occurs to him. Whereas that is not true of the other people I mentioned, the luminaries. So while I admire his pluck, I do not admire how he treats people, how he relates to people. And the big difference, and because I've studied influence for a long time, you have to understand that the things that Dr. King did and the things that Jim Jones did, Jim Jones is literally the drink the Kool-Aid guy, right? And if you don't know, if you're listening and don't know what drink the Kool-Aid means, I mean, he had a cult and he got people to drink Kool-Aid and kill themselves. Yeah. Now, both Dr. King and Jim Jones use a lot of the same tools of influence to get people to enroll in their movement. But the difference, and it's a huge difference between King and Jim Jones, and also now Elon Musk, who's more on the Jim Jones side than the Dr. King side, is where you headed? What's your mission? What's your vision? What are you bringing to the world? Right? King, Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Richard Branson, Nelson Mandela, they all had a very clear vision of what they wanted to bring to the world, and they were headed in that direction. And it wasn't a thing, it was an ideology. And I don't know that Musk has an ideology. He wants he wants humans to be a multi-planet species. Makes sense. Great idea. We shouldn't have all of our eggs in the Earth basket. So humanity can persevere, but it's a thing. It's not an ideology.
Right.
And the greats follow an ideology. And that's why when I started Dan Gordon Enterprise, I started with an ideology, not a thing. And I still pursue that ideology. And I still make huge mistakes, but I always come back to the ideology because that is where I've always been successful and ultimately help more people.
No, that's awesome. Not to defend Mr. Musk, but I will say that I believe he's on the spectrum. Doesn't he have Asperger's or something, or Asperger's?
He does. He has. He's shared with the world that I'm not sure if it's Asperger's, but he's on the spectrum.
Yeah, so that might be why he comes across so abrasively or whatever. I'm not an expert in that at all, so I'm just putting that out there.
I look, I still admire there's a great interview with him on 60 Minutes, and Scott Pelley says, "Hey, how did you expect to start an electric car company and a spaceship company and be successful?" And he said, "Oh, I didn't. I expected to fail." And Pelley's like, "Well, why would you start a business expecting to fail?" And he says, "When something is important enough, you do it regardless of success or failure." I love that.
Yeah.
Right. I champion that.
Well, that's awesome. So taking a look at these individuals, these people that you've pointed out that have awesome traits and things that people can take inspiration from. What are some traits that you suggest leaders and entrepreneurs avoid?
Well, I mentioned it just a moment ago, going for a thing instead of an ideology. If you don't have an idea of what you want to bring to the world, of how you're going to change that, like, look, let's say that you invent a great new fishing lure, right? And it catches bass like crazy. What's the ideology behind that? Well, what if it is so that people who are on their downtime can experience more joy, more relaxation, recharge their batteries, connect with their friends. So when they go back into the fray, into work, they feel more encouraged, they feel more revived. Okay, now that's an ideology that you can build on, because instead of making another fishing lure, now you can create something else that builds on that ideology and expand that, because that's something that people can get behind. And look, any brand has to be something that people can get behind. It can't just be a thing that people like. It's an idea that people want to champion.
It brings me to a guest we recently had. The episode was recently released, although the interview took place a couple months back. It's Bill Harper, a wonderful and brilliant marketer, who shared what he calls the tow truck example. And in it, he speaks of, for those of you that did not listen to that great episode, please go back and listen to it. He speaks of a person who's in a hurry to get to an event, and he gets a flat tire and it's raining like crazy, and he's dressed very nicely, so he cannot get out of the car. And he calls a tow truck company, and imagine two experiences. One, the person from the tow truck company comes to your window. They both arrive about 15 minutes after you call them, knocks on your window and tells you, "Hey, we've been in business 25 years. We care deeply about you. That truck that you see behind me, that's a specialty truck. We had it specially designed so that we don't scratch your car, and we have these great tires on it so that we don't slide off the road, and etc." And the other person knocks on your window and says, "Look, our philosophy is we get you back on the road in 15 minutes. I'm going to get to work."
Yeah.
One of them has an ideology or a philosophy, and the other doesn't. And the one that does, I would say, has greater odds of being successful because they know what they're trying to do. They know who they are. And that's what I'm hearing you say, I think.
Mm, yeah. And look, don't put your ideology, don't put your mission statement on your website. No one cares about your mission statement. You should.
Live
But
it.
that, right? Yeah, that mission statement is about you. It's not about other people. And nobody cares about you. They only care about the part of you that benefits them. Getting back on the road in 15 minutes. Like, boom, that's what I want. I don't
Yeah,
want to hear about your stupid truck.
no, look, this is so true. Back in the day, I was starting, and Tal, I haven't actually shared this with you. Back in the day when I was starting up my custom made blue jean company, and I was starting to look into it, I noticed that there was like maybe one or two other companies that were doing the same thing at that time. And I was like, these websites suck. I can outmarket this, right?
Mm,
I know how to make this seem more appealing. But I also noticed that one of them didn't like we're not taking any more orders, and it had been like months. So
mm,
I called the number. Like they had a number for the company, so I called them. I ended up talking to the owner of that blue jean company, and I just wanted to find out when they were going to order, because I was going to order one to see what happened. He kept me on the phone for like 45 minutes, and he shared his like entire life story. But one of the things he was telling me was like, hey, we invested all of our money into these laser cutting machines, and they cut the jeans within 1/16 of an inch of accuracy, and da 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 da, and blah 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 blah. And I just remember sitting there thinking, no one cares about
right.
what lasers you bought to make these things. All they care about is when they put them on, do they fit? And if they fit,
Mm,
and it doesn't matter about anything else. I mean, as long as you're not using child labor, but
right. Yeah.
out of that, right? As long as you're being a responsible corporate entity, no one cares about the lasers, dude. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I had a client once who's a pediatric dentist, and he got this new X-ray machine. I mean, this is back a long time ago. It's before digital, and he was telling me how he wanted to put out some marketing about this great new X-ray machine, all the cool things that it does. And he's just he's reeling off this list of things like nobody cares, and like the last thing was that it processes X-rays 45 minutes faster, or twice as fast. And like, wait a second, you can get people out of the dentist's office twice as fast. That's what we're going to market. And that was it. People came in because they didn't have to spend as much time in the dentist's office. The thing, and I'm talking to you, the listener, the thing that you love about your product or service and want to tell everybody about, nobody cares. Go to where your clients are, turn around, look at your business from their perspective, not yours. What did they want?
Yeah, and I'll give you
Not
another
what do you
example
want
of
to sell
that.
them?
I literally happened to see it this weekend. I was walking in St. Pete with my girlfriend, and walked by a tattoo shop, and the sign on the window said, "Our tattoos do not hurt. Come in here and be stunned by how we can give you a tattoo and there's no pain." Now, I don't know how they do that. I have a few tattoos, but man, was that compelling.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
There's there
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
there's one other thing that I want to talk about, and that is my secret weapon. This is something I share with everybody, my clients, certainly people on planes and trains in line at the grocery store. Stress is the number one killer of entrepreneurial success. Stress and lack of sleep. It's one of the first things that I ask potential clients: how much sleep are you getting, and how much stress do you feel throughout the day? Because it seems like it's not controllable. And it's something that I have been looking for solutions for a long time. And I've tried like meditating, I've tried like microdosing, and I found this thing called binaural beats. Have you heard of this?
Nope.
Binaural beats, it's essentially music, right? So you're listening to music, and underneath the music are audio waveforms that affect the brain. And I was drag kicking and screaming to this idea because it sounded so hokey. But it turns out that this company that I found is called Nucalm, Nucalm. Over 50 professional sports teams use this. The Department of Defense, Special Forces, Navy SEALs, Air Force, like FBI. And it has become this worldwide program that they use. And it's now available on the phone. And so I started using it, and it has really helped I get more sleep, I'm more focused. And I called up this company and I said, I'd love to share this with people. Can I get a free offer? And so if you want to try this, and I really suggest that you do, it's just listening to music. You can text the word calm, CALM, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366. Text the word calm, CALM, and get a free, I think it's a week or 2-week trial of this. And it's just give it a try. You're really going to be amazed at how it affects your mood. It's crazy that it works, but it works really well. I mean, and there's a bunch of them out there, but this is the only one that's that the military is using. That's a class 3 medical device by the FDA. You can tell that I'm really charged up about it. Give it a try. Text calm.
Sounds really interesting. And I don't know about that particular company or their product, but I do know that there is a device. My girlfriend is a psychotherapist. She uses it with patients, and it's a device that sends you put them on you, and it sends vibrations. Those vibrations sound somewhat similar, at least logically. That those vibrations, their impact is to calm you. And so it sounds like the music vibrations are reaching you another way, maybe another part of your brain, but very similar approach. I will say this: I think that you're on to something really critical. I think we've all met those entrepreneurs who wears a badge of courage, that they work 100 hours a week. They don't get any sleep. Let me tell you, to those of you in the audience who perhaps are getting started in entrepreneurship or in the early throes of whatever it is that you're doing in business, that is not compelling. Not only is it not compelling to whomever hears you, it's going to kill you. I've been there. I was one of those entrepreneurs that did it and talked about it and felt proud of it. The 2 reasons that you shouldn't do it are: 1, it's not good for you. It's not healthy. 2, if you're in a company and you have people working for you, you're going to cause them to feel compelled to work longer and harder. And frankly, that will drive their performance levels down, and it will decrease your odds of success. So move away from that old school thinking. I want to end, Dan, with a quote that you gave us in the pre-interview that I thought was stunning. I don't know if you came up with it, but if you did, trademark it immediately.
I hope I did.
If unlimited success sounds impossible, it's only because you were taught to think by limited people. Wow. First of all, I think it's a really interesting observation. Most of us, by the way, have probably been taught by limited people. Very few of us are fortunate enough to have someone in our lives that tell us we can do anything. I think maybe the generation of children growing up now is maybe a bit more accustomed to believing that they can do anything. I think growing up, I'm in my early 50s, wasn't quite how we were raised. But for our listeners who may feel constrained by their current mindset, what would you suggest they do? What steps would you suggest they take to start seeing and living life with unlimited potential?
I'm resistant to give this advice because it doesn't sound really all that appealing. I feel bad. Go for things that are difficult. Try things where failure is the most likely outcome. And in order to do that, God, I feel like I'm about to cry. In order to do that, you're going to have to learn to love yourself like you never have before. I've seen so many entrepreneurs like run the race of life, beating themselves with a stick, saying, as soon as I cross the finish line, I'll stop beating myself up. And that's how I motivate myself. It doesn't work that way. You have to love yourself through every challenge, every failure. Look, like I said earlier, I did something, I really hurt a client. I said something that was really hurtful it wasn't what I wanted, but I went too far. And I got a lot to clean up with that client. And so I've been feeling bad about it, but I know if I talk to that client feeling bad about myself, I'm gonna be, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I've been feeling bad. Like that's all about me. I have to clear it with myself first, to love myself. I have to understand that it wasn't done for the purpose of being hurtful. Or when you fail, it wasn't done for the purpose of losing a lot of money or losing someone else's money, which is worse. It was done for the purpose of pursuing your greatest self. And you're going to have to find a way to love and forgive yourself and to understand that this is a part of living great. And if that's not what you want, fine, go get a job. Don't complain about it though. Every successful person has been through this. Every successful person has had these monumental failures. And the way that they came back from it was to excuse themselves from it. And the way that you practice doing that is to go out there and screw up. That's the only time you can practice loving yourself is when you're at the depths. When I was on that floor, I knew that the only way to come back was to appreciate how I got there and what I was going to do next. I hope that answers your question, Tal.
It does. I mean, it's got to be one of those compelling answers we've gotten in, I don't know, 100 hours of interviews we've done so far. So that says something. It definitely reached me. I actually, as you know, PJ and I are communicating during the show, and I wrote the following. I wrote, "What a moment, beautiful," because I really felt that way.
Thank
And I
you.
want to tie that to something you said in the very beginning, because you do need to be able to forgive yourself. I strongly agree with that. Nearly always in those moments where something really bad happens, the first instinct is to deflect and blame. That is
Yeah.
a human emotion. I experienced a horrific setback, and arguably, I had people to blame for it,
Mm.
and I did initially. And I've spoken about it in my own interview. It's the very first episode of the podcast. For those of you who haven't listened to it, I invite you to go find it. I spoke about the fact that my therapist invited me to tell the same story, except in this
Mm.
version, I wasn't a victim.
Yeah.
Tell the same story where you're not the victim. Now, you're not the villain either.
Mm-hmm.
You're just a person doing your very best. And wherever you found yourself from this point forward is the only place where you could do something about it.
Yeah.
There is a tendency, I think it is most common among people that fall short, to be bitter and to blame.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those same people tend to also be really mean to themselves. Now,
Yeah.
maybe publicly they're mean to others, but when the lights go off and they're with themselves, those people are also, generally speaking, extremely hard on themselves. And so, to the audience, I
Mm.
encourage you to listen to what Dan said. It's worth it's worth rewinding to hear that last piece about how critical it is to love yourself, do difficult things, love yourself through them, but also, as Dan said at the very, very beginning, his very first answer, don't blame, take responsibility. That is often what is the mark of success. People who are stand up, willing to own up whatever it is that took place on their watch or around them, knowing that sometimes the best thing you could take away is the lesson. And the lesson is, to quote Dan, the lesson is not the opposite side of the coin. It's that, it's just as much a part of success as success itself.
Yeah.
Well, it's also like accountability with grace, right?
Mm. I
That's
love that.
kind of what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. And look, if you think about it, I've listened to just about every speech the King has given that's recorded. I mean, I'm such a fan since sixth grade. I've been a fan of his. I never heard one speech where he said, "I have been shamed and hurt, and I have been mistreated." Never. Gandhi, never. Branson, never. And they were. I mean, it was just. I mean, look, there's footage of King getting beaten up, or at least his follower, and he never said that. The only thing that came close is in the mountaintop speech. He talks about that he was in a plane that couldn't take off because a bomb threat was called in and he said, by one of our sick white brothers. I mean, that's as close as he got to blaming someone. And he still called that man a brother. And he called him sick, not wrong or not a jerk, but sick, misguided. I mean, that is
Mm.
grace. And, and to your point, Tal, I really love what you said about, telling the story where you're not a victim. I went a little further and I told the story from the pathological liar's point of view. Out loud, I had a dialogue or monologue talking from his point of view about why he was right and why I wasn't, because I wanted to get into his mind, because understanding him was the only way I could first forgive him and then forgive myself. And it's the same thing. I rarely talk about this. It's the same thing I did with my father, who was unspeakably cruel to myself and my brothers. But I came to understand that this poor soul was a cauldron of internal struggle and torment. And that cauldron would boil over onto my brothers and I. And now when I think of him, and he's dead many years now, but when I think of him, my heart goes out to that poor guy. That he was feeling that turmoil all of his life. And so it isn't about saying that the people who hurt you, it's okay, but it's understanding that they have a sickness, and that investing yourself in that sickness does not help you move forward. It only slows you down.
But also that gift that you just gave yourself to not hold that pain, right? And to be able to move past it and say, hey, you know what? Now I feel sorry for you. And I'm in a position of strength to be able to offer that grace back to you. I think talks a lot about maturity and growing, right? I mean, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Friends, our guest today on a podcast that's running in two places. Ours, the Braving Business Podcast, and the For Badass Entrepreneurs Only, which is Dan's successful podcast. Coach Dan Gordon, a super interesting individual who's an inspiration, I think, in two ways. One, because he's openly talking about where he was when this journey began, which is, as he said, face down on the floor in a hotel. PJ and I have shared our face down in you literally, I remember PJ going back to the hotel after a pretty horrific experience on a TV show. Sort of described it the same way.
Yeah. Darkest moment of my life. Had no idea what was going to happen the next day.
Yeah. Wow. And I would say that I had a similar experience not that long ago, several years back, when the company that I had grown from nothing to be a substantial enterprise suffered a setback that essentially wiped tens of millions of dollars of investor equity, including my own. And those moments, those really dark moments, to emerge from them and still have the opportunity to live a life with purpose and a life that's joyful, incredibly enough, is not as hard as it seems. It is about daring, getting up, getting back in the arena, whatever that arena is. And you did that. PJ, you've done that. I've done that. It doesn't mean the journey's over. None of our journeys are over. But the fact that we've been on these journeys, hopefully, is inspiring the people that are listening, so that as they go through trials and tribulations, as we all do, everyone that's gone to the top experienced those lows. Keep going, keep pushing. You'll get there. Dan Gordon, it's been so great. Go ahead.
Can I for one more thing? So I talked about the stories that we tell ourselves, and I actually wrote a book called "Jumping the Gap: Kill Your Stories and Take Action." And I'd like to give that book away, if I may.
Of course, yeah. So let's do that.
Okay, just text the word GAP. Same thing. Text the word GAP, GAP, to that same number, 213-409-2787. 409-8366. Text GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. And to be clear, this isn't a funnel. You won't get the book for free, then be asked to buy something. You just get the book. It's a quick read. And I just finished an audio version of it too. So if you prefer to listen other than read, you can consume it that way. But it has helped a lot of people because I've gotten a lot of nice feedback from it. Killed those stories that stopped them.
And if you didn't catch the number, go ahead and send us a note at www.bravingbusiness.com. We'll be happy to connect you to Dan and his team and get you a copy of the book. Coach Dan Gordon, thank you so much for sharing some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you. This has just been delightful. This is really one of the best shows I've ever been on, from the nature of the heart-centric approach that the two of you take and the questions that you ask. It's really been a joy. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
Hey, one last thing. If you're feeling stuck in business life, wherever, download my book, Jumping the Gap, Kill Your Story and Take Action. In this book, you'll see how the stories that you tell yourself are stopping yourself from living your greatest life. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to this number, 213-409-8366. 213-409-8366, and text the word GAP. It's a short read, it's fun, it's easy, and if you hate reading like I do, you can grab the audiobook. It's at that same link. Just text the word GAP, G-A-P, to 213-409-8366. You'll love it. All right, that's it. Go out there and be badass today.